Previously on Game of Thrones, instead of actually bringing you up to speed in what happened last episode, we're going to show you the main characters that are going to feature in this episode. Well, this trailer does include some bits of what happened last episode, but Sam and Gilly weren't. Anyway, I feel I should introduce this video with the following precursor. This episode contains a lot of filler. This cannot obviously be avoided, and anybody who watches this show should be aware by now that this is going to happen so that the more climatic episodes can have more of an effect. I predict that I may not have that much to say on this episode, but I'll try my best to make this review as interesting as I possibly can. I'll throw a few funny things and witty comments, but don't expect this to be the best review ever, and alas, the show must go on. Over to you, Mrs. Nesbit.
Are you sitting comfortably? Then we'll begin.
The first segment of Jon waking up is executed fantastically. The shots are long and painfully drawn out to really emphasize how much of a bizarre experience it must be for Jon. It did ultimately turn out to be that Melisandre is just really old, according to David Benioff, but it's interesting that after this reincarnation of Jon, her fiery passion to lead the Lord of Light and fulfill the prophecy has returned. She's no longer moping, she's intrigued, wide-eyed and energetic. Out at sea, however, the irritations begin to fester in this scene with Gilly and Sam. My memory of this segment in the books was that this journey is dreary, filled with irritable members of the crew and just general misery as Maester Aemon's health deteriorates and the baby just doesn't stop crying. The TV's version of this is a dumbed down and almost pointless scene, where we have some supposedly comedic moments mashed with Sam being sick. Gilly has never seen the sea in her entire life, nor been on a boat, and yet here she is bounding around like an excitable child. All we establish is that Gilly's going to meet Sam's family instead of going to the Citadel. What a bundle of laughs that will be. Now the next part was very, very interesting, considering where we go from where this scene ends and the consequences of its contents. It's shot absolutely magnificently. Arthur Dayne is made to look like a complete badass, and yet Eddard looks quite childish. I know he's like 19 during this segment, but considering Sean Bean's figure in the first series, I don't know, it just doesn't quite seem like it's him. Maybe I'm wrong, it's probably just a gut feeling. Tell me if I am. I mean, just send me a Snapchat and I'll get back to you when I can. There's this fantastic shot here of 5 of them fighting and it's just gorgeous. The fighting and choreography is impressive as always. The most interesting part about this is how Ned Stark wasn't entirely true about his defeating of Arthur Dayne. This was supposed to be the most honorable man in Westeros. Could there be other things that aren't as true as we think they are relating to the Starks? I mean, I still don't know why there has to be a Stark in Winterfell all the time. Perhaps there's something Ned kept from us too. Or I'm just really stupid. The Khaleesi meets all the other Khaleesi's, and good, they took that bloody net thing off at last. I'm very interested to know what kind of decision they make on what to do with her, although my instincts are rather conflicted. I'd expect them to just rape her and keep her as a trophy, but then again, she has this special status of being a widow to a Carl, so God knows they might just get lectured again by her instead about how great and powerful she is. Back in Meereen, we have more boring chit-chat to pass the time. Varys advises a woman not to kill anybody anymore, and Tyrion has an awkward chat with Missandei and Grey Worm. I honestly don't blame him for drinking his tits off, considering how awkward and boring everyone around him is besides Varys. This scene with Tyrion really should have started here. Oh. This would have established continuity from the previous scene and not wasted everybody's time. Back in the capital, Qyburn becomes the new renowned Westerosi paedophile, and Cersei wants constant surveillance on everybody to ensure that no wrongdoing is committed. This creates a very interesting dynamic between the Faith and the Crown now, especially considering what was established last week. The High Sparrow said that the poor and the hungry will be able to overthrow the Crown due to there being so many of them, which kind of reminds me of Marxism. Now that Cersei wants eyes and ears everywhere, that's kind of like an Orwellian nightmare. We really do see a clash of left and right wing ideologies that's embedded into what happens in real world politics. Of course, neither constant surveillance or mass opposition to authority is specific to either the right wing or the left wing, but it's just a very interesting dynamic that's been unfolded before us, and I really can't wait to see the conflict between the Faith and the Crown. I find it very interesting also that the Crown and the Faith are tossing Tommen back and forth because he's so easily manipulated emotionally. His mother will tell him that she is a victim in all of this, and of course he'll go over and have a bitch fit to the High Sparrow, who in turn will sit down and tell him that there's two sides of the coin. I hope this pendulum of reactions leads to Tommen's death. Could be really interesting in terms of plot. Back in Bravos, Arya's learning how to fight blind. I'm still disappointed that they haven't touched on the warging yet, but this training session she has is a lot more interesting in its delivery compared to the previous scenes she's been in during this season. This montage of trial and error is a lot more concise in delivering what needs to be shown, and cuts with the dialogue and the blows she receives, which is a lot more interesting. This also makes her sight returning that little bit more dramatic. Had the show filmed this section in exactly the same way we saw in the past two episodes, I'd probably have just skipped over this section entirely. The Bolton scene was very interesting to watch, considering the however many directions this story could go. Unfortunately, I don't really care much for these two characters, but the whole "a Stark is always needed in Winterfell" thing springs to mind, and so my interest is piqued a little by Rickon's return. AltShiftX made a very good point, however, that his head is quite small for a direwolf head, and that this may not be Shaggy Dog after all. I think this scene played out very well though. This Umber character is very interesting considering his prior loyalty to the Starks and his disregard for tradition and licking the arse of those in charge. Could he help the restoration of Winterfell to the Starks? That'd be pretty cool. Back at the Wall, I find it very interesting that Thorne was the only one who didn't look absolutely pathetic with that noose around his neck. The first two blokes I almost laughed at in their responses, but Alice's is almost admirable. His dedication to the Watch is fantastic and can be seen here in this scene. The moral dilemma that goes on about Jon killing Ollie is very interesting as well, and can be seen as the episode chooses to linger on the shot of Ollie's suffocated corpse as opposed to any of the others. On the one hand, he's just killed a child, he's no better than Stannis burning Shireen last year, but on the other, Ollie did kill Jon. Well, took part in it, and justice has now been served. Speaking of the killers, where are all the other people who stabbed Jon? I'm sure there were more than 4 people there that night. Then again, I've forgotten who else took part, so I highly doubt everyone else's brains can remember either. So, did it suck? Yeah, I didn't say that in the first 2 episodes, but I'm going to say it from now on, because otherwise this series might as well not be called Did It Suck. This episode was very interesting, but had some of those few irritations that I have outlined. Last week's was stronger, but this was certainly better than the opening episode in my opinion. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Subscribe if you want to see more in the future. And here are the outtakes. It did ultimately turn out to be that Melisandre is really old, according to David Benioff, but it's interesting that after the Gilly has never been seen. No, she's never been seen in the sea. That would probably make sense. Of course, neither constant surveillance or mass opposition